welcome to Daily News Simplified. Here we take important articles from The Hindu and curated as per the demand of UPSC Civil Services Examination. The topics for today's discussion are mentioned over your screen. So let's begin our session. The first topic for today's discussion is based on this article which appeared on the page number 10 of The Hindu. The context of the article is that 3 Indian states, Gujarat, Maharashtra and Telangana, have deferred a proposal which was approved by Genetic Engineering Appraisal Committee. The proposal was to test a new kind of transgenic cotton seed that alleges to make the cotton resistant to pink bollworm, which is a major pest infecting the cotton crop. The following topic is important for our GS paper 3 for the subject Science and Technology under the subsection Biotechnology. Now in this article we will learn what are transgenic crops with a special focus to BT cotton and what is this present issue. So what are transgenic crops? Transgenic crops are the genetically modified crops. These are the plants that have been genetically engineered. Now why are they genetically engineered? Such that these plants possess some specific traits. These may be the resistant to pest, diseases or herbicides, or the improved nutritional content in that crop, or increased yield in that crop. And how it is done? This is done through the introduction of foreign genes in that particular plant from any other organism. And this genetic modification process can be achieved through the use of biotechnology. And this genetic modification in the crops can be achieved through the use of biotechnology techniques. Now let us understand this with an example of a popular transgenic crop, BT cotton. If you are aware, BT cotton is the only genetically modified crop allowed to be cultivated in India. Though in the year 2022, government has given approval for the environmental release of a mustard hybrid, that is Dhara Mustard Hybrid 11. But still, this mustard hybrid is one step away from commercial cultivation. So as of now, BT cotton is the only genetically modified crop allowed to be cultivated in India. The approval for the cultivation of this crop was given in the year 2002. So this GM crop has been developed by US firm Bayer Monsanto. BT cotton has the desirable genes from a soil bacterium called Bacillus thuringiensis. So there is a soil bacterium Bacillus thuringiensis that has some desirable genes, Cry1AB and Cry2BC. And these genes produce some protein of our concern. Now what happens is that these desirable genes from the bacterium are inserted into the cotton plant, and hence this cotton plant is genetically modified into BT cotton. Now this particular protein is toxic to pest pink bollworm, which is a pest which feeds upon cotton crop. Hence, by the insertion of this gene into this cotton plant gives the protection to this crop from pink bollworm. Now let's come to the news article. It was about testing a new kind of transgenic cotton seed which contains a gene Cry2A1. Over the years, pink bollworm pest began to develop resistance against this protein. So scientists have sourced another gene which is Cry2A1, and this is also derived from the same bacterium Bacillus thuringiensis and which makes the cotton pest resistant. Now let us understand another dimension of the news. That is the regulation of transgenic crops in India. Since we saw earlier, presently BT cotton is the only genetically modified crop approved in India. Now who gives this permission? This permission is given by Genetic Engineering Appraisal Committee. So it is a technical body under the Ministry of Environment, Forest and Climate Change. The body evaluates and grants approval for the environmental release, import and commercial cultivation of genetically modified organisms, including genetically modified crops. So this committee reviews the biosafety data and conducts a thorough evaluation for any transgenic crop. This evaluation is done to check is there any environmental risk related to that crop or the potential impacts of that crop on human health, biodiversity and for any other socio-economic aspect related to that crop. Hence, for an approval of any transgenic crop, there are multiple level assessment and field trials. So what are open field trials? These genetically modified crops are grown over any particular area over some seasons and in various type of geographic conditions. This is done to assess the suitability of these transgenic crops on a case-by-case basis. But there are some issues regarding the open field trials for these crops. Genetically Engineering Approval Committee had recommended the field trials of this new transgenic crops with this particular gene in 4 states: Telangana, Maharashtra, Gujarat and Haryana. But since agriculture is a state subject, and in order to conduct the trials, the permission of these particular states is required. And as of now, only Haryana has given permission for such tests, and other states have not given the permission. The Department of Biotechnology has suggested that across India there should be some regions which should be declared as notified testing sites. And in these testing sites, the companies and institutions who want to conduct trials would not require permission from that particular state. And to expand your understanding of this topic, you can further find out what are the benefits of GM crops and what are the potential concerns regarding GM crops. The next topic for today's discussion is based on this article which appeared on the page number 10 of The Hindu. The context of this article is that recently the union government has imposed a stock limit on wheat. This means that there is an upper permissible limit on holding wheat by wholesalers and big chain retailers. So what are these limits? The maximum permissible stock the wholesalers can hold is 3000 metric tons, and the retailers can hold up to 10 metric tons of wheat at each of their outlets. And this stock limit is up to the end of this financial year, that is till March 2024. You don't have to remember these numbers, these were to just give you a basic idea of this news. Now this topic is important for our GS paper 3 economy. Under the syllabus, issues related to direct and indirect farm subsidies and minimum support prices, public distribution system, and issues of buffer stocks and food security. Now what is the objective of this ceiling? This is to manage the overall food security and to prevent any wheat hoarding. Now this move by the government is because of some concerns. These concerns are primarily regarding the price inflation of wheat. In the previous financial year, the prices of wheat rose sharply because of disruptions caused due to Russia-Ukraine war and heat wave conditions last year. And although the retail inflation of wheat had come down during October and November 2022, but this retail inflation bounced back in January 2023, and in the past month alone there has been more than 10% rise in the price of wheat. And as we all know that wheat is an essential commodity, and if there is a rise in the price of wheat, this will also be reflected in other grains like rice and other cereals. Now what were the factors that lead to the uptrend in the price of wheat? The first factor is wheat prices in India generally rise from December to March. Now this is because as wheat is a Rabi crop, it is only sold by farmers in the Rabi marketing season, which is from the month of March to June. So in the month between December to March, there is an uptrend in the price of wheat. Now secondly, there had been hoarding by traders in the prospect of exporting trade at higher international prices. But soon after, there was a ban on wheat export by the government of India, and they had left with no option but to hoard this wheat. So this stock limit is also to discourage the traders from holding further. And finally, the climate vagaries due to unseasonal rains in the last cropping season had destroyed some standing crop of wheat. And also there is a concern that this year may be an El Nino year, and because of which the monsoon may be delayed in India, and because of which it is expected that this will lead to an increase in the price of wheat. So in this background, the government of India has taken some steps to ensure the adequate supply of wheat and also to cool down the soaring wheat prices. And these steps are the imposition of stockholding limit, which we have already discussed. Apart from this, when government want to control the retail inflation of any food grain, particularly wheat or rice, the government can adopt another measure, which is open market sale scheme, to enhance the supply of food grains and thus to lower the prices or to control the retail inflation, especially during the lean season or in the grain deficient regions. The Food Corporation of India will sell the surplus stock of wheat and rice under this scheme. This surplus stock will be available to the flour mills, private traders, bulk buyers and manufacturers of wheat products at a predetermined price through an e-auction. Thus, with the surplus supply of grains in the market will control the retail inflation. However, there is also a major concern regarding the imposition of ceiling on wheat hoarding or wheat stocks. The issue is that wheat is produced seasonally in India, and as it is a staple crop, it is consumed throughout the year. Hence, the uniform supply of wheat throughout the year requires stocking significant amount of grains and conducive stocking norms in order to incentivize investment in post-harvest storage and food processing infrastructure. But this ban on stocking of food grains is contrary to this government policy directed towards food processing and cold storage. So it will discourage the investor who is investing in post-harvest storage or cold storage or food processing infrastructure. The next topic for today's discussion is based on this article which appeared on the page number 9 of The Hindu. The context of this article is that as India is having a high prevalence of stunting, wasting and anemia, which continues to pose a public health risk for women and children. So in order to tackle it, India must strengthen its existing social sector scheme, particularly the Integrated Child Development Services or the ICDS scheme. So this article is important for our GS paper 2 for social justice. Under the syllabus, welfare schemes for vulnerable sections of the population by the center and states and the performance of these schemes. ICDS or Integrated Child Development Services is a centrally sponsored scheme which was launched by the Government of India in the year 1975. The flagship program by the Government of India targets children aged between 0 to 6 years, pregnant women and lactating mothers. It addresses non-formal preschool education and aims to improve the nutritional and health status of children in this particular age group. The scheme offers a package of 6 services for its target beneficiaries. As we have already discussed, the children between the age of 0 to 6 years, pregnant women and lactating mothers. These services include number 1, supplementary nutrition. These components aim to bridge down the gap between the recommended calorie intake and the average calorie intake of children and women in the low income category. And this is done by providing them supplementary nutrition or supplementary food. So under this category, the children below the age of 6 years and the pregnant and lactating mothers are provided supplementary food and growth related services. Another component is health and nutrition checkups. So for the target beneficiaries, the services provided are routine health checkup, diarrhea treatment, deworming treatment, tracking of their weight and vaccinations received. Another component is the education regarding health and nutrition. So under this component, the women between the age of 15 to 45 years of age are provided information regarding their health and nutrition. Now this is a part of a long-term strategy for behavioral change and communication. And it is aimed to build the capacity of women to look after their health, nutrition and development such that they can fulfill the needs of their children and family. Another component is immunization. Under this component, the children are vaccinated, which include the vaccination against diphtheria, polio, whooping cough, measles, tuberculosis and tetanus. Apart from children, women are also vaccinated against tetanus to reduce neonatal and maternal mortality. Another component is referral services. So during the routine health checkups, any condition or disease which required immediate treatment is referred to a hospital or primary health center. And under this initiative, the Anganwadi workers are trained to identify the disabilities in children in order to provide them early intervention. And the final and the backbone of ICDS system is preschool non-formal education. So under this component, non-formal education is provided to children in the age group 3 to 6 years in all the Anganwadi centers of villages, rural areas or urban slums. ICDS scheme was launched in the year 1975. Now despite the 4 decades of launch of this scheme, India has a high prevalence of children who are stunted, wasted or have anemia and are malnourished. So there are various studies which have shown that there is a correlation between early life poverty, malnutrition and inadequate stimulation, which can later develop into cognitive and economic challenges. By focusing on the interventions regarding nutrition, education, health during early childhood can significantly improve human capital. And this is highly significant for a developing country like India, which has a huge population. So this highlights the significance of schemes like ICDS. However, there are certain limitations to the ICDS scheme. The limitations are: the Anganwadis do not cater to the children who are below the age of 3 years. The primary focus of Anganwadis is on food supplementation, and which majorly targets the children above the age of 3 years. And they have not proved much instrumental to cater to the need of children who are below the age of 3 years. This is a concern because malnutrition can set in early even in the children who are below the age of 3 years. Hence, it becomes a major concern. Further, the Anganwadi functions only for a few hours a day, and this makes it inconvenient to send and pick up children in Anganwadis, especially for working people. Further, there are the issues of lack of coordination among the Department of Health and the Department of Women and Child Welfare. And this lack of coordination has been reflected in some schemes, such as under the immunization program, there is no convergence of effort between health personnel and Anganwadi workers. And one concern mentioned in the article is that the Anganwadi workers are often overworked. As due to limited number of Anganwadi workers, they are often stretched beyond their limits. So the way forward in this regard can be: there should be an early intake of children in the Anganwadi centers. That is the intake of children below the age of 3 years. Also, there is a need to employ additional Anganwadi workforce. And this move, apart from improving the well-being of rural communities, will also provide job opportunities for local residents, particularly women. And finally, the infrastructure of the Anganwadi centers should be improved, and the implementation gap or the lack of coordination between the departments should be minimized. The final topic for today is based on this article, which appeared on the page number 8 of The Hindu. The context of this article is that the Union government is all set to appoint the next Finance Commission in the next few months. Finance Commission is a constitutional body that determines the allocation of taxes between the central government and the states. So for this very purpose, India will soon appoint the 16th Finance Commission. So in order to understand other nuances of Finance Commission and the recommendations given by the 15th Finance Commission for the year 2021-2026, let us refer to the comprehensive analysis by Basava sir.
Let us first understand as to why do we need the Union Finance Commission in a federal polity such as India. See, the federal polity that India has adopted provides for the distribution of legislative, executive and financial powers between the center and the states. In particular, the 7th schedule of the Indian Constitution provides for 3 lists, that is the Union list, State list and the concurrent list. So we have 100 subjects under the Union list, 61 subjects under the State list and 52 subjects under the concurrent list. Now, with respect to the distribution of legislative powers, the Parliament alone can make laws on the subjects placed under the Union list. The state legislature alone can make laws on the subjects placed under the state list. However, for the subjects placed under the concurrent list, both the Parliament as well as the state legislature can make the laws. However, in case of conflict between the Union law and the state law, the law made by the Parliament shall prevail upon the law made by the state legislature. This is as far as the distribution of legislative powers is concerned. With respect to the distribution of executive powers, the central government has the power to implement the laws related to the Union list. The state government has the power to implement the laws on the subjects placed under the state list. As far as the concurrent list is concerned, see, with respect to implementation of laws on the subjects placed under the concurrent list, we cannot have both the central government and the state government implementing the same laws, because this can lead to the problem of coordination. Now, for example, education and forest are the subjects which have been placed under the concurrent list, which means both the parliament as well as the state legislature can make laws related to the promotion of education and the protection of forest. But we cannot have both the center as well as states implementing these laws. We need to have a single authority to implement the laws on the subjects placed under the state list. Now, in case of India, it is the responsibility of the state governments to implement the laws on the subjects placed under the state list. This is as far as the executive powers are concerned. Now, if you look at the distribution of the taxation powers or the finances, the center has relatively higher finances in comparison to the states. This is so because the most important taxes in case of India, such as the corporate tax, income tax, customs duty, etc., these taxes have been vested under the control of the central government. Whereas the less important taxes such as the property tax, professional tax, excise duty on liquor, etc., have been vested under the control of the state government. So the amount of revenue that the state government earns, that is comparatively lower as compared to the revenue earned by the states. So if you look at the overall responsibilities of the center and the states, it is being said that states have comparatively higher responsibilities in comparison to the center. This is on account of mainly two factors. First and foremost, if you look at the responsibilities of the state governments are required to implement the laws on the subjects which are placed under both state list as well as concurrent list, whereas the center would be required to implement the laws only on the subjects placed under the union list. So this is the one reason as to why the responsibilities of the states are more than the center. Second reason being, if you look at the most important subjects which are to do with the inclusive growth and development, for example, agriculture, health, public order, etc., all these subjects have been vested under the control of the state government. So the state governments are required to spend more amount of money in order to promote inclusive growth and development in a federal setup such as India. That is why the states have comparatively higher responsibilities in comparison to the center. So this creates a kind of fiscal imbalance. Fiscal imbalance because the center has relatively higher finances but relatively lower responsibilities, while the states have relatively higher responsibilities but relatively lower finances. That is why we need to provide for a mechanism to transfer the finances from the center to the states. Now this transfer of finances from the center to the states basically takes place through the Finance Commission and through the centrally sponsored schemes. Earlier, this also used to take place through the Planning Commission, but I hope you must be aware Planning Commission has been done away with and the Planning Commission has been replaced by Niti Aayog, and Niti Aayog right now does not have the power to transfer the finances to the states. So right now this fiscal imbalance in the federal polity is addressed through the Finance Commission transfers and the centrally sponsored schemes. So Finance Commission, as I stated before, it is a constitutional body set up under Article 280 of the Indian Constitution. It is required to be set up by the President every 5 years or earlier. The Indian Constitution has not given elaborate provisions related to the composition of the Finance Commission. The composition of the Finance Commission has been provided under the Finance Commission Act 1951. Under this particular act, the chairperson of the Finance Commission needs to be a person who is an expert in the field of public affairs. Apart from the chairman, we need to have 4 other members who are expert in the field of economics. Second member should be an expert in the field of financial matters and administration. Third member should be an expert in the field of finance and accounts. And the fourth member should either be a former judge of High Court or he should be a person who should be qualified to become a judge of the High Court. So this is the composition of the Finance Commission. As far as the 15th Finance Commission is concerned, the 15th Finance Commission is headed by Mr. N.K. Singh. The recommendation of the Finance Commission is to provide for the vertical distribution of taxes between the center and the states, horizontal distribution of taxes among the states, provide for the grants in aid to the states, and lastly, after the implementation of 73rd and 74th Amendment Act, a new mandate has been added to the Finance Commission. The mandate here is the Finance Commission is required to recommend measures in order to augment the resources of the panchayats and municipalities, and this recommendation is given by the Union Finance Commission based upon the recommendation submitted by the State Finance Commission. Let us now look at the recommendations of the 15th Finance Commission. First and foremost, we do have the concept of the divisible pool of central taxes. So all the taxes collected by the center, such as this corporate tax, income tax, customs duty, etc., all of these taxes become part of the central divisible pool of taxes. However, please do note that surcharge and cess, which are imposed and collected by the center, they are not part of the central divisible pool of taxes. So while all the union taxes such as the corporate tax, income tax, etc. are required to be distributed between the center and the states, the surcharge and cess continue to remain only with the center. Now, the first set of the recommendations of the Finance Commission is with respect to the vertical distribution of taxes. That is, the Finance Commission recommends as to what percent of the central divisible pool of taxes should remain with the center and what percent should be transferred to the states. So as you can see, in its first report, the 15th Finance Commission had recommended that the center should transfer 41% of the central divisible pool of taxes to the states. In its second report, the 15th Finance Commission has decided to continue with the same share of the state taxes at 41%. So as you can see, the 14th Finance Commission had recommended for a transfer of 42%, but the 15th Finance Commission has reduced the share of the state taxes by 1%. This is mainly on the account of fact that the erstwhile state of J&K has now been turned into a union territory, because of which the overall share of the state taxes has got reduced by 1%. So once the vertical distribution of taxes is decided, the second set of recommendations is with respect to the horizontal distribution of taxes. Now the horizontal distribution of taxes basically tells us as to how this 41% of the state taxes has to be distributed among the different states in India. See, the different states in India have different requirements. Their population is different, their area is different, their development needs are different. So by taking into account these parameters, different states should get different share of the state taxes. Accordingly, the Finance Commission usually adopt the criteria for the horizontal distribution. So as you can see, the 14th Finance Commission had adopted the criteria of population of 1971 census, population of 2011 census, area of a state, forest cover, income distance criteria. So among all of these criteria, the highest criteria was given to the income distance. Now, under this income distance, the Finance Commission looks at the per capita income of a particular state and compares this with the per capita income of the richest state in India. That is, whichever state has the highest per capita income, with that particular state, the per capita income of a particular state is compared. So if the difference between the per capita income of a particular state and the per capita income of a richer state is higher, this means that this particular state is quite poorer, because of which this particular state would get highest share of the finances. On the other hand, let's say the difference between the per capita income of a particular state with the per capita income of a richer state is quite lower. It means that a particular state is quite richer, because of which such a state would get less share of the central taxes. So this particular criteria of income distance has been adopted in order to promote balanced regional development among the states in India. Now, as far as the 15th Finance Commission is concerned, whatever criteria of the 15th Finance Commission had adopted in its first report, it has decided to continue the same criteria even in its second report as well. So as you can see, it has completely done away with the population of 1971 census. It has given a higher weightage to the population of 2011 census. It has introduced the criteria of forest and ecology, wherein it is looking at the share of dense forest in a particular state. It has also introduced the criteria of tax efforts, which is basically looking at the tax to GDP ratio of a particular state. So whichever state has taken adequate number of measures to increase its tax to GDP ratio, such a state would get higher share of the central taxes. Now, one of the most important parameter which has been introduced by the 15th Finance Commission is with respect to the demographic performance. See, when the 15th Finance Commission was initially appointed, the center had recommended, or rather asked, the 15th Finance Commission to explore the possibility of completely doing away with the population of 1971 census and use only the population of 2011 census as a criteria. But if the 15th Finance Commission had completely adopted the population of only the 2011 census and done away with the census of 1971, then this would have gone against the interest of the southern states. Now, if you look at the southern states in India, particularly the states such as Kerala, Tamil Nadu, etc., these states have taken adequate amount of measures as part of the family planning, because of which they have been able to reduce their overall population growth rate. The fertility rate in these states is quite lower in comparison to the northern states. So, if you take into account only the population of 2011 census, then this would go against the interests of the southern states. So amount of the central transfer to the southern states would be lower in comparison to the northern states if we adopt only the population of 2011 census. So the southern states felt that they are wrongly penalized for reducing their population growth rate, while the northern states are being incentivized to increase their overall population. Hence, in order to take into account the concerns raised by the southern states, the 15th Finance Commission has introduced the criteria of demographic performance. Now, under this particular criteria, the 15th Finance Commission is looking at the overall fertility rate in a particular state. Fertility rate, as you know, basically denotes as to how many children a woman gives birth to during her reproductive age. So if the fertility rate in a particular state is lower, it means that such a state had taken adequate amount of measures as part of family planning programs and has reduced its population growth rate. Accordingly, such a state would be given a higher share of the central taxes. On the other hand, if the fertility rate in a particular state is even today higher, then such a state would get less share of the central taxes. So this particular criteria of demographic performance has been introduced by the 15th Finance Commission to take into account the concerns raised by the southern states. Now, apart from the horizontal distribution of taxes, the Finance Commission also provides recommendations with respect to the grants for various aspects. For example, one of the most important grants recommended by the Finance Commission is the revenue deficit grants. In order to recommend for the revenue deficit grants, the Finance Commission looks at the revenue deficit of a particular state and then recommends grants in such a way that the revenue deficit of a particular state becomes equal to zero. Now, for example, let's say for the state of Karnataka, the revenue expenditure is rupees 150, whereas the revenue receipts is equal to 100. So in this particular case, the Karnataka government is facing a revenue deficit of rupees 50. Now, the Finance Commission may give a recommendations to transfer a revenue deficit grant of rupees 50 to the government of Karnataka so that its revenue deficit becomes equal to zero. Now, this particular approach followed by the Finance Commission is referred to as the gap filling approach. The other set of grants recommended by the Finance Commission are with respect to the grants to the local bodies, about which we'll be discussing later, sector-specific grants to various important sectors such as education, health, drinking water, sanitation, etc., and grants for the disaster risk management, about which we'll be discussing next. See, the Disaster Management Act 2005 provides for the setting up of the National Disaster Response Fund at the center and the State Disaster Response Fund at the state level. The Finance Commission usually recommends as to what should be the corpus of NDRF and SDRF. So once the Finance Commission recommends as to how much money should be there in NDRF and SDRF, the center would then mobilize the money. The money for NDRF is mobilized by the center mainly through two routes. One, from the allocation from the budget, and second one, through the imposition of the National Calamity Contingency Duty. The National Calamity Contingency Duty is a form of surcharge on customs duty as well as excise duty on certain important products such as alcohol, cigarettes, petroleum products, etc. So whenever any entity is paying the excise duty or the customs duty on these products, on top of these duties, they would be required to pay the surcharge, and all that surcharge would go into the National Calamity Contingency Duty, which then is used for the National Disaster Response Fund. As far as the funding for the SDRF is concerned, the funding is provided both by the center as well as the states. As you can see, for the general states, the center provides 75% of the funding, and the remaining 25% of the funding is provided by the respective state governments. In case of the northeastern and Himalayan states, the funding pattern happens to be 90:10. Now presently, the NDRF and SDRF funds can be used only for providing rescue and relief operations. They cannot be used for mitigating the impact of disasters. Now, for example, if a particular state is affected by floods, then the money under NDRF and SDRF can be used only to provide rescue and relief operations. They cannot be used for creating the flood embankments, that is, to mitigate the impact of floods. Now, the Disaster Management Act 2005 provides for the setting up of the mitigation funds both at the center as well as the state level. Unfortunately, these mitigation funds have not been established. Accordingly, the 15th Finance Commission has recommended that both the center as well as states have to set up the mitigation funds at their respective level. And once they are established, they would have to merge into their respective disaster response funds. Now, for example, at the center, NDRF and NDMF should get merged into a new fund known as the National Disaster Risk and Mitigation Fund. Similarly, at the state level, they should get merged into State Disaster Risk and Mitigation Fund. As we can see, the corpus of this particular fund can be used both for rescue and relief operations as well as to mitigate the impact of disasters. For example, they can use 80% of the funds to provide rescue and relief operations, and remaining 20% of the funds can be used for mitigating the impact of disaster. So this particular recommendation of the 15th Finance Commission has already been accepted by the Union government, and hence this is going to give a big fillip to the mitigation of the disasters in India. Accordingly, this becomes quite important for your upcoming prelims examination. The next recommendation of the 15th Finance Commission is with respect to defense modernization. See, presently a major chunk of the defense expenditure is majorly spent for the revenue expenditure, that is, for the payment of salaries and pensions of the defense personnel. Less amount of money is spent for the capital expenditure, that is, for acquiring new weapons and ammunitions. Accordingly, in order to undertake defense modernization, the 15th Finance Commission has recommended to create a separate and dedicated fund known as Modernization Fund for Defense and Internal Security. This fund should be a non-lapsable fund under the public account of India. The money for this particular fund can be mobilized from basically three different sources. First one is from the Consolidated Fund of India. Second one is to the disinvestment of the defense PSUs. And third one is through the monetization of the surplus defense land. Coming to the last set of recommendations related to the transfer to the local bodies. See, just like how you have the Union Finance Commission at the central level, we do have the State Finance Commission at the state level. The Union Finance Commission basically decides as to what percentage of the taxes collected by the center should remain with the center and what percentage should be transferred to the states. The role of the State Finance Commission is almost similar. The State Finance Commission basically decides as to what percentage of the taxes collected by the respective state government should remain with the state government and what percentage should be transferred to the local bodies, that is, to the Panchayati Raj institutions and the municipalities in a particular state. The Union Finance Commission is set up under Article 280, whereas the State Finance Commission for the Panchayati Raj institutions is set up under Article 243I, and for the urban local bodies, it is set up under Article 243Y. The Union Finance Commission is set up by the President, whereas the State Finance Commission is set up by the Governor. The Union Finance Commission can be set up every 5 years or earlier, whereas the State Finance Commission has to be set up every 5 years. So the word or earlier is not mentioned for the creation of the State Finance Commission. Now, with respect to the recommendations of the 15th Finance Commission on the grants to the local bodies, see, usually the Finance Commission do not recommend for the grants to local bodies in terms of percent of the divisible pool. Rather, they recommend for the grants to local bodies in terms of absolute amount. So when the 15th Finance Commission submitted its first report, it had recommended for the transfer of 90,000 crores for the year 2021. And now in its second report, which will be applicable for the period 2021 to 2026, it has recommended for the transfer of 4.36 lakh crores. So as stated before, the Finance Commissions usually recommends for grants to local bodies in terms of absolute amount. But if we convert this in terms of divisible pool of central taxes, this would be approximately 4.23%. Now this particular article, that is the lead article that we are discussing, has highlighted that the overall transfer of grants to local bodies has increased over a period of time. Secondly, see, once the Finance Commission decides as to how much of grants should be given to the local bodies, these grants to local bodies in turn have to be distributed among different states. So just like how we have the criteria for the horizontal distribution of taxes between the states, the Finance Commission also adopts a criteria for the distribution of these grants to local bodies. The 15th Finance Commission has basically used two criteria for the distribution of grants to local bodies in different states. This is based upon the population of 2011 census and the area of a state. So whichever state has higher population, whichever state has a higher area, the local bodies in such states would get higher grants from the central government. Thirdly, the grants to local bodies have to be distributed between the Panchayati Raj institutions and the urban local bodies. Now, in its second report, the 15th Finance Commission has recommended that 65% of the grants have to be given to the Panchayati Raj institutions and remaining 35% of the grants have to be distributed among the urban local bodies. The grants which are recommended by the Finance Commission, they can be of two types, that is the tied grants and untied grants. Tied grant basically means that the Finance Commission will lay down the purposes for which the funds can be utilized for. Untied grants means the local bodies would have complete operational and financial autonomy to decide as to for what purpose the funds can be utilized for. Now the 15th Finance Commission has recommended that 60% of the funds should be tied funds. So the 15th Finance Commission has recommended that 60% of the funds should be used for various national priorities such as water, education, health, sanitation, etc. Whereas remaining 40% of the funds can be used by Panchayati Raj institutions and urban local bodies according to their local priorities. Apart from that, the 15th Finance Commission has also laid down certain conditionalities on the PRIs and urban local bodies in order to avail these grants. They are basically required to fulfill two conditionalities. First and foremost, for the previous year, the PRIs and urban local bodies, they would be required to submit their annual accounts in an online mode. And for the year before, they would have to get their accounts audited. So only when they are able to fulfill these two conditionalities, they would be able to avail the grants. Now, with respect to these recommendations of the 15th Finance Commission on the grants to the local bodies, this article has raised certain concerns. The first concern is with respect to the criteria for the horizontal distribution of grants. Now, as stated before, the 15th Finance Commission has decided to distribute the grants to local bodies to different states based upon the criteria of population and the area of a state. Prior to the 15th Finance Commission, the 13th Finance Commission had also used the criteria of income distance. So, as stated before, under the income distance, whichever state is poor, such a state would get higher share of the taxes. But the 15th Finance Commission has done away with the criteria of income distance, and it has used only the criteria of population and the area of a state, because of which the local bodies in poorer states may not get adequate amount of resources. Apart from that, the 15th Finance Commission had also used the criteria of share of SC and ST population in a particular state, which also has been done away by the 15th Finance Commission. So, on account of the fact that the 15th Finance Commission has done away with the criteria of income distance as well as the share of SC and ST population, the local bodies in the poorer states may not get adequate amount of finances. This is a concern which has been raised in this particular article. Secondly, the 15th Finance Commission has laid down that if the local bodies have to avail the grants from the center, then they would have to fulfill these two conditionalities. But the article has highlighted that in spite of these conditionalities which have been repeatedly imposed by the earlier Finance Commission, the local bodies in case of India have failed to upgrade their financial reporting system, because of which some of the local bodies may actually miss out on getting these grants from the center. So these are some of the important aspects which one should know with respect to this particular article.